How do you define something that is so intangible that even the results of it may not show up for weeks and perhaps months? Gateway in and of itself is properly defined as, say, a means of freedom, a new kind of freedom that perhaps you've never before experienced in your life. A chance at this new kind of freedom. Also, it's an exploration, say, of consciousness, and most particularly your consciousness. How does it do this? Well, I'm sure you're aware of, right at this particular moment, what we call Hemi-Sync, or Hemi-Sync, a loose term that we use for hemispheric synchronization, which is what you're here to do, to experience the process of hemispheric synchronization. If you don't know about it, perhaps I should hand out some brochures that tell you what Hemi-Sync is. Suffice to say that it is a method. It is one of the tools, and perhaps the basic tool, that we use in Gateway. And speaking of tools, that's what the real process is the teaching of mental tools to achieve this freedom that we speak of. And that freedom can only be expressed by your own consciousness, not mine, not any of the people who help you go through this Gateway process. It comes from your own actions. Now, we have only one particular piece of dogma that you have to consider. And that is that you, the essence of you, are more than your physical body. What that means beyond that particular statement is part of the exploration of consciousness that you yourself will enter into. Consciousness, such a loose word to describe something that's so tremendously vast. And human consciousness in and of itself, what we know of it today, is only perhaps a fraction of the reality of what human consciousness can be. Gateway helps you explore the borders, the edges of human consciousness as we know it. The tools we provide, again, help you do and perform that exploration. One of the things that we insist on, that you do understand, that Gateway does not guarantee that you will have an out-of-body experience. Now, of course, I know you, a lot of you perhaps came saying, oh, I will have an out-of-body experience. Percentage-wise, I would say that, 15% of the people who attend a Gateway session have an out-of-body experience during the session. The tools are for consciousness, and the out-of-body state as we know it is a form of consciousness. The tools that we provide you perhaps at some time may let you achieve this state of being out of body. But there's no guarantees in this particular program that will take place either during the program itself or subsequently. If so, I think you check with our friendly supervisors who are waiting nearby, and they will be glad to say, well, I'm sorry, this is not for you, if that's your total expectation, because we can't guarantee it. How could we guarantee what any human being will do? The opportunity, yes. The possibility, yes. The tools, as I said, yes. Guarantee, no. So, with that in mind, and that this is an exploration of consciousness for you, if you learn these tools and you apply them, indeed it will give you an indescribable kind of freedom in the days, weeks, the rest of your life. That's what these tools can do. However, we have one small problem, maybe two, maybe three. To utilize these tools properly, you have to begin at least the primary stage of understanding yourself. How do you do this? You have to understand, first of all, what you are, where you are, and later on you will find perhaps why you are. There are barriers that you encounter in this exploration of consciousness. These barriers in and of themselves are not insurmountable, but albeit they are barriers. There are two, possibly three primary barriers that will stand in your way. The first of those is fear. And the fear association and the underlying pattern of fear-rage is the primary one. And you say, oh, I don't have any fear, or I don't have any rage within me. Some of the most profound people have made that statement, and when they begin to uncover other elements in their exploration of consciousness, elements of themselves, they discover this fear and this rage. And as they probe deeper, and this is why this thing is so important, this prime position of accepting or considering a belief, this rage and fear among most people has to do with death. It's a fear that I will die because of an immense pattern that you have developed from birth, perhaps imprinted at birth, that said survive. And we have learned to take that survival imprint just because of physical living. And that survival says physical survival. And physical survival is totally destroyed if there is such a thing as death. Once you have the knowledge of that fear, and it is the undercurrent of all of us, there is the related factor, and that's rage. What's the rage all about? The rage is due to the fact that you're going to have to die. See how they connect? Fear. I'm afraid I'm going to die. To anger because I have to die. And that defeats the whole concept, the entire concept of survival. Because that imprint you have learned or believe has to do strictly with physical survival. So much of your life has been geared to physical survival. Virtually all of our culture is aimed at physical survival. So what are we talking about? Consider that first pattern. The first pattern being, I am more than my physical body. If you consider that premise, that tiny piece of dogma, as possibly being real, then you have to consider very seriously that being more than your physical body, you also may well continue to be more than your physical body. That is one of the prime possibilities of freedom that Gateway provides. But the tools help you determine that there, one, is a pattern in existence where this more than the physical you survives a thing we call physical death. That's one of the prime ones. How is this covered over? This is covered over by the enculturation that is worldwide. It's not peculiar to our, quote, American cultural system. It's worldwide. the fact that we in turn have established belief systems that set up boundaries that encase all of us within a box. And that's the limit of our belief systems. And we feel safe and secure, as our culture helps us do, in these particular belief systems that create the box. And we do not want necessarily to remove the box. And in removing just a little crack in the box may seem very, very, very dangerous to all of these belief systems that have, well, perhaps we learned some of them on our mother's knee. Perhaps in school we learned them. They've been all around us. The things, the structures that create a box that limits us. Gateway helps you create windows and doors in that box. That box in which I have been, in which I am still to a very great degree. And your box is much the same. I've been in your box. My box has many holes in it now, of course. And yet that box still exists because I am here now. What is your box? I can't tell you what your box is. That restrains you. It took me long enough to find out what mine was, never mind yours. And I'm not interested in knowing the details of your box. My job is to act as a catalyst to help you create doors and windows in that box. Gateway. Freedom. Freedom from the box. There are a few other things that might help you in turn get started on this gateway voyage, this gateway discovery of who you are, why you are, what you are. And part of that is in turn, most importantly, a way whereby you can get a different perspective on yourself and where you are. And being kind of a lazy type and running out of words, if you will join me over at that favorite device called a flip chart, I'll try and get my left hand to work to describe it a little more graphically, or at least it gives me an excuse to describe it more graphically. Well, this is a flip chart. And flip charts are supposed to flip. So suppose we flip the flip chart. And happily we have something on the flip chart courtesy of a friend. What was I going to talk about? Oh, yes. Who we are, where we are, why we are. The best I can do at this moment is to help you begin to understand where you are. Therefore, it's easier to do it graphically. Let's take these different patterns of the human. Let's assume that B stands for birth. And this is a line of growth, of experience as a human. Let's say that this is a path. And this expresses what I will call a state of innocence. At birth, you begin this pattern as a clean slate, as a human clean slate in human consciousness. As you begin to grow, you lose these parts of innocence. You lose only part of them under a standard procedure. Look over here and I'll show you what I mean. The average human loses this innocence for a given part of his life, and then on the rest of his life, he moves along to the exit point, which some people like to call death. I'm one of them. along this path of innocence to an exit point, and most of that loss of innocence occurs during the first 20-some plus years of a human life. How does one lose this innocence? One loses this innocence through the old familiar cause and effect law. What is that law in terms of innocence? A child, a little child we hope, learns through cause and effect that if he touches this hot stove, the stove burns his fingers. Therefore, he has lost his innocence relative to stove-burned fingers. In doing so, he has picked up authority and responsibility, which go hand in hand with cause and effect. Authority, responsibility. He now has the authority to continue to burn his fingers and the responsibility for having burned fingers, because mommy can't be around all the time to see that he doesn't burn his fingers, because he's a sneaky type. But he has learned for himself that he can no longer get away with the effects of touching hot stove. So he picks up the authority and the responsibility. That is that path of innocence. The more authority, the more responsibility that you assume in your life, the greater the loss of your innocence. However, because of how we live, the culture in which we live, and this is worldwide, we turn that authority over to others, and concurrently we turn the responsibility over to others. Of course, mommy and daddy take care of it up to a certain stage in our culture, and purportedly are supposed to let go after that and let that human assume his own authority and his own responsibility. Be that as it may, if you look back over and see this path, it's very flat because of, at this point we learn certain growth, and moving on through here, we turn it over generally to the enculturation of others, and that's what produces the box in part. Now, first, the tools that are a part of Gateway, the process of Gateway changes that, accelerates that pattern of loss of innocence and the accumulation of authority, responsibility. So that is moving over on this path over here to a mystical state called adulthood. And that state of adulthood is virtually an unattainable goal, but we reach as far as we can to obtain this form of adulthood. Adulthood, in and of itself, the assumption of as much authority and responsibility as we can. Now, so that's one gauge of where we are. And look what we may do in terms of reaching that goal of adulthood. All right? Next stage. Here, let's say over here, is a road. Same pattern. Birth. And this is the road of maturity, we call it. Again, a learning process that stops here ordinarily and moves along in a relative level path over to the exit point. Level. Gathers very, very little more of what we call maturity. How does one measure this business of maturity? Again, this is from our perspective. One measures maturity based upon the number of illusions that you have discarded or released. Illusions. Not disillusions, not illusions torn from you by some traumatic event or by things beyond your control, but your deliberate release of illusions. Perhaps the most cherished ones are the most difficult ones to release, but that's part of it. Again, then, this gateway process in leading to that almost unattainable goal of maturity is measured again along the number of illusions, the amount of illusions that you have discarded or released. The gateway process, again, helps you, assists you, but no more, does not define by any manner or means your illusions that you will release and discard, leading to this pattern of maturity. Maturity. Release of illusions. Now we have another highway, because it becomes more significant. We had a path, a road, and now a highway. This highway begins at birth, has pretty much the same growth statement, but this highway leads to an indefinable state that we call wisdom, an unattainable goal way up here. Wisdom. How do we measure that pattern? As you can see, the wisdom pattern, again, is very, very flat. Gateway process, the tools, if you use them, lead you again on a higher and higher reaching curve leading to wisdom. It's not to say that you'll get to this total wisdom. How do you measure that? That is measured along the scale of your actions, what you do, think, and be upon the release of the illusions that you get rid of, discard, understand. That's the measurement of wisdom. The measurement of wisdom. Again, the flat line as against this growth line provided by what you are into now. Gateway. Finally, and the most difficult to define of all, is what we've tried already to say, and that's freedom. And generally here, freedom may occur somewhere where you're past 21, past voting age, or whatever it is. And that's a flat line. Again, look at these flat lines, and here, wisdom, maturity, innocence, freedom. And the freedom that we're speaking about is so far off the scale I can't even measure it. This is perhaps an inch in 100,000 miles. How is that measured? How do we measure that sum on the direction of freedom? That is a compendium of these three growth patterns, these three patterns of development. That's the freedom. How to express that freedom for you individually? I wouldn't think to even seriously consider how in turn to define freedom for you. I can for me, but I can't for you. Those are the boxes we are all in. The freedom is moving out away from the confines of those boxes. Those boxes, your box, mine, whatever. That's the best way I can describe what the freedom is. So anyway, I've had my fun with my chart. Let me go over here. So, perhaps in some way that will give you an idea of the beginning for you of Gateway. Where you are, how you are, why you are the subjects that you will investigate in your exploration of your own consciousness. Now, there are several other points that I think you should be aware of. We have an affirmation, as you're, I hope, have read anyway at this time, and it does say a statement, an affirmation that you are more than your physical body. But there's another part of it, and a lot of people say, what does that mean? And that statement is, for those who follow me. Gateway, the process in and of itself, is an evolving unit, an evolving pattern. You are following some, 4,000 plus people who have been through the Gateway process and have contributed their experience in this to what you work with, the tools you use. They are a product. What you do and what you respond to within the Gateway process itself is utilized and built into this training mode for those who follow you. So you in turn make your contribution just as you are working with the contributions of all of those who preceded you. For those who follow you, you will leave your stamp, your contribution to the Gateway training system. Most of all, whatever you do, it is a fun process. If you lose the fun of it, you've lost the entire thing. So, all I can tell you is, as you learn the tools, as you learn to use them, make it joyful. Have fun. Go to work now.